And now on the BBC World Service, following the announcement of the death of the American singer and actor Meat Loaf, here's another opportunity to hear him speaking to HARDtalk in 2016.
My guest today is a rock and roll legend whose career has been a triumph against very long odds. His real name, Marvin Aday, will mean nothing to you. He was an overweight kid from Texas who had a tough upbringing. His mother died young. His dad was an alcoholic. But Marvin could sing and he loved to perform. He adopted the name Meat Loaf and found his way into musical theatre, then rock and roll. His life changed forever when his album Bat Out of Hell, written by the songwriter Jim Steinman, became one of the biggest sellers of all time. Since then, Meat Loaf's career has been a dizzying roller coaster ride of epic songs, chaotic touring, health scares, bankruptcy and bust-ups with his longtime collaborator Steinman. Through it all, Meat Loaf has kept on going. Now he's back with a new album, but how close did he get to self-destruction? Well, he joins me now. Meat Loaf, welcome to HARDtalk.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I want to start by considering the span of your career. You've been in the music business and acting as well for pretty much 50 years.
Yeah, this coming February, I actually know the date, February 17th, I will have been in show business for 50 years.
Yeah, you call it show business, and you have been putting on one heck of a show. And the way you do things, whether it's on stage acting or whether it's performing the music, it is all in. I mean, you give it everything. I'm just wondering whether you ever reached a point where you thought, you know what, I've had enough of this. I've given enough.
No, and I'll explain to you why. Because I'm always learning. So I will arrive, let's say, at a show 4 or 5 hours before the show. Because the show before, I didn't listen to myself sing. I'm the only singer I know that doesn't listen to himself sing. That's a mistake sometimes. But I listen to what I did. But also, every song in that show is a different character. So what happens is, as I'm listening back to the song, I'm starting to maneuver myself into the different characters.
So you mean you don't sing as yourself? It's
No.
a more theatrical thing. You're singing parts.
See, I don't consider it theatrical. I consider it to be the truth. When you go to theater and you see great actors in a play, you almost float. It's almost a floating experience because they're not acting. They're telling you the truth of the moment. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do in everything that I do. You're talking to Meat Loaf, but if you were to see me in a show, every song is a different character. And we don't stop. It's like a symphony. It just keeps going.
You're
like
in
a
character
symphony.
throughout.
Well, I switch them.
I want to take you back and then talk through your career a little bit. To be blunt about it, at school, you were an overweight kid who got teased, who had a tough time, who had tough times at home as well with parents who struggled, and your mum died young.
Yes.
How is it that you turned yourself from a small town kid with problems to this big time performer?
Oh, I don't look at myself as a big time performer. I refuse to allow them in any advertising for an album, for a concert, or anything, to use the words icon, legend, star, or rock star. To me, I'm just another person, and I have a job.
But I want to get to this point about confidence and being an extrovert. You know, if you're a kid who is finding life pretty tough, aged sort of 10, 12,
yeah.
How do you get the confidence to become the performer that you were by the age of 20?
Well, there's so many people in life that have rough times in their lives. You know, got an alcoholic father.
Which you did.
Who tried to kill me with a butcher knife. a mother who died of cancer, and that almost destroyed me. I mean, it took me 10 years to get over that. But I can't, like on my father's side, you get too many people in the world that act up and do things, and they go, well, my father did this, and so this one. And I don't live that way. I love my father. I've forgiven my father. God bless him, and my mother. And I'm going to cry, and because I don't do that.
No sense of blame in you?
No,
and
you can't.
You just took responsibility for your own life.
I take responsibility for my life and my life only.
So let's get to that. You were raised in Texas, but you made it to New York, and you made it into Hair, and I think in Los Angeles you got a part in the musical, and within a pretty short time you were in the rock and roll business as well. What would you define as your biggest break?
Well, there's two of them. One was getting involved with Joseph Papp at the Public Theater, who had the nerve, and I'll give him credit, to put me into 2 Shakespeares in the Park, and I've never read Shakespeare. I have now. I made it a point. On one tour, I read every Shakespeare play on days off. And the other is Lou Adler from the Rocky Horror Show.
Which did bring you quite a lot of fame.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say something else. I thought you might say your biggest turning point was meeting Jim Steinman. Well,
that's an obvious one. But I met Steinman at Joe Papp.
Right.
I auditioned for Steinman.
And for people who don't know the Meat Loaf story so well, Jim Steinman is your collaborator, a guy who's written songs with you, going back.
He's been one of my best friends for 46 years. I love him dearly, and I'm going to put a little plug real quick here for him. He's got a musical that he has dreamed of for over 50 years, and it is finally being done. And it's opening in Manchester in February and moving to the West End in April.
And that is the musical of the
Bat Out of
album
Hell.
that defines you to a certain extent.
Yeah,
Bat Out of Hell.
I keep seeing things about his play, and it just keeps talking about me. And I'm going, no, stop talking about me and talk about Jim.
Well, I'm going to talk to you about Jim quite a lot because your life and his have been intertwined, and not always in a good way. But before we get to that, let us remind everybody of the sound of Meat Loaf and Bat Out of Hell. That was Jim Steinman and Meat Loaf's Bat Out of Hell from Carlin Music and Sony Music. I was a schoolboy entering teenage when that came out, and I remember the whole school listening to that album.
Well, then that meant you were later on, because when that album came out in October of 1977,
That's right.
everybody hated it. We were turned down by everybody in every record company 4 times. And if it wasn't for Little Steven in the E Street Band that plays with Bruce, that record would have never come out. Because there was a gentleman who used to be head of A&R at Epic, who started his own label. And Little Steven said to him that the beginning of Took the Words was the best 20 seconds in rock and roll history. And so Steve Popovich believed everything Little Steven told him.
Right.
And so he
took you on.
And he signed
But you know
us.
what, Steve Popovich, who eventually signed you, and obviously the record became a massive worldwide hit, he said this. He said, I was reluctant for so long because he said Meat Loaf was too fat, too ugly, his hair was too long, and his voice was too operatic. But why did people get it so wrong, do you think? I mean, that seems so superficial.
Well, they're not wrong. I weighed about 310 pounds. I wasn't ugly. I disagree with them on that. And my voice is naturally operatic. I'm a Heldon tenor. And when I did my first Shakespeare, Joe Papp, it was As You Like It, and Shakespeare had written a song. Of course, we didn't have any music because we didn't know what music he wrote. So they hired David Shire to write the music. And when I sang it, one night I had opera patrons come backstage and offer me $60,000 a year for 5 years, $300,000 to study with Pavarotti's coach.
Really?
And make my debut at the Met, because there's very few Heldon tenors in the world.
You could have been America's Pavarotti.
Well, I could have been. The problem was, it was very tempting, but like everything I've ever done, I had to research it. And I found out unless you're Pavarotti, unless you're Placido Domingo, unless you're Beverly Sills, the conductor is in control of everything. And I am too much of a rebel and too rebellious to let some conductor tell me how to do something. And I would have wound up in prison for life and would have murdered him.
Well, let's talk about rebellion and your innate desire to get close to the edge of life. Because after Bat Out of Hell came out, as you say, it was a slow burn maybe at the beginning, but it sold in the end big time. Over 40 million records.
Yeah.
It's in the top 5 best-selling albums of all time. So by 78, and I guess later 78, you're a massive star because of the album, and you're touring the world, and you lose it. I mean...
Oh, I hated being a star. That's why I lost it. I lost it partly because I knew what Jim and I had, because we had played little clubs in New York, little supper clubs for 100 people, 125, 200 people, and people would go crazy. I mean, not just applaud politely, or even, like, yay. I mean, crazy.
But what I'm getting at isn't so much the reaction of the fans, which was fantastic. I'm getting to your reaction. I mean, there was drugs, there was booze, there was bad behavior.
No, there wasn't. There wasn't.
You called yourself a monster at one point. You talked about throwing mic stands, not just at your bandmates, but also at the audience.
No, that was a character. I threw them in Paradise at the end. I threw a mic stand. The guy at the end of Paradise was a monster. I threw a mic stand towards Carla, but I never hit her because I wasn't going to aim like that. If I'd have wanted to hit her, I would have hit her.
Well,
But see, that's all. That's media. I've always been very disciplined because I started off.
But what about the cocaine?
Oh, that was minor. I mean, that
really? I mean, Bob Killick, who was playing with you in the band, he said the problem with Meat Loaf was that the road ended up nearly killing him.
Oh, it did. But it wasn't because of cocaine. It was because I was so bound and determined to make this record happen that we would do 5 or 6 shows a week. So I was working non-stop to make this record happen.
And you also pushed yourself beyond your physical limits, because
Yes.
there are famous pictures of you lying backstage after a show with the oxygen mask.
Well, I have asthma.
I know you have asthma,
Yeah,
but I mean, I'll tell you what Jim Steinman said. He said, after the 78 tour, he'd lost his voice. He was pretty much losing his mind.
Oh, I had a nervous breakdown. And I was at a psychologist for about 10 months, 5 days a week.
Why? Was there a self-destructive element within you, or what was it?
No, the whole thing with the psychologist was, you know what I said to the psychologist, he goes, "Why are you here?" I said, "Because people are calling me a star, and I can't deal with that."
Right. That's very interesting. And it seems to me we can't discuss your career, and we're going to go right through it if we have time, but we can't discuss it without coming back to this relationship with Jim Steinman. Because he was writing the songs, certainly wrote Bat Out of Hell. You did some more collaboration with him, but oftentimes after that, you did your own albums too. But the truth is, if one looks at it, your albums without Jim Steinman were never as successful, and most folks would say never as good as the work you've done with Jim Steinman.
Yeah, they probably weren't, but believe me, I wouldn't have put it out if I hadn't loved it. I mean, I did a duet with Roger Daltrey on Bad Attitude, but Jimmy is one of the greatest writers in history. I mean, he's in the category of Richard Wagner. I mean, he's in that category.
But,
I think he's an old soul.
Forgive me for playing the pop psychologist, but here's a theory. You struggled with the stardom and all of the focus on you because from the very beginning, Meat Loaf, the name, had been you, and the music seemed to be you, when in fact Jim Steinman was absolutely crucial collaborator, but he didn't get the credit. So that made the spotlight on you all the greater. And at the same time, Jim Steinman has been very frank and said, you know, I wanted more recognition because I was there, but I wasn't, my name was never attached.
Absolutely.
So why, you know, and you guys fell out over that.
No, we didn't. We never had an argument. We didn't really fall out.
Well, you sued each other. He sued you, and
no, that's what happens when record companies or managers start to sue each other. They don't sue each other. They have to put our names to it, and then they say, don't talk to each other.
But Jim Steinman, I mean, he must have been aware that the legal suit that his lawyers launched against you bankrupted you for a while. I mean, you had to declare bankruptcy.
Yeah, but not because I couldn't pay the MasterCard, or I couldn't buy groceries, or I couldn't do any of that. It became because we were in Chapter 11, which was allowed you to
and to protect your assets while you're trying to,
Yeah, and it wasn't because you get all these stories of all these, you know, rock stars spent all their money and did all this. Well, I never had any
frankly,
money.
many of them snort it away or drink it away.
Yeah, well, I don't like alcohol. I throw up at the smell of champagne.
Right.
The only thing that I ever touch is tequila. I don't sit home and drink tequila. I never drink tequila at home. I don't drink anything at home. I don't even drink soda pop.
No. I mean, I suppose what's interesting, because, you know, your partnership with Steinman is one of the great sort of creative partnerships in music. It didn't work for a while, and then you came back, I think, in '93 to make Bat Out of Hell, the follow-up. Two.
Which we started in '87.
That's right, and that sold really well, did fantastic. Then you tried to do Bat Out of Hell 3 without him, and that really didn't work.
Well, see, that was a problem, and that was managers fighting. And when Jimmy and I got together to do this record.
Which brings us to the present day, because now you've got a new record out, which is some old songs and some new songs, and which is another full-on collaboration with you and Steinman.
Well, I told him things that had happened about Bat Out of Hell 3. There was so much he didn't know.
Right, so you've totally reconciled with him now.
Jim and I have never had an argument.
Let us, in that spirit, you and Jim working together, just listen to one of the tracks on the new album. That was Meat Loaf's Going All the Way from his latest album, Braver Than We Are, from 429 Records and Caroline International. Your voice is mellowed, Maybe Rolling Stone said there's a much sort of gentler vibe to the new album, Braver Than We Are. Have you dialed back or not?
That was a conscious, yes, Jimmy and I both discussed this. We did not want to recreate Bat Out of Hell or Bat Out of Hell 2. I said, the first record we're going to do, and we both said, Who Needs the Young? And that's the first song that Jimmy ever wrote as a songwriter.
Right.
And he was 19 years old. And
It's interesting because it's all about aging. It's in the voice of a man who's considering what it means to get older.
Yeah, but I did it. I sang it as a 19-year-old.
Right. But let's get to that, what it means to get older. We all have to consider it.
Well, getting old is not for wussies. That's what I say.
I get you. Because, you know, over the years, coming back to this physicality of your performances, you've fallen off stages, you've done your knee in Ottawa back in '78, you've had collapses on stage, you've had heart conditions, asthma.
I've had 18 concussions. I've fallen 3 stories off a balcony. I've been in planes that landing gears didn't come down. I'm a cat with 49 lives.
And you've got a bad back, which is restricting your movement right now.
Yeah, which I can't work, which is driving me crazy.
Well, I'm telling you, you've got a plan to tour Europe. You said you weren't going to tour so much anymore, but you got this plan to tour Europe with the new album. How can you do it having battered your body to the degree to which you have?
Well, I'll get my back fixed. I don't want to travel and I don't want to pack, but I want to do the shows.
Right. But that means you got to travel and you got to pack.
Yeah, I don't want to do those 2. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
I think I've heard. I heard that before. Now look, I don't want to end on a morbid note, but I just think it's a rather wonderful thing that you have said, because you are committed to continuing performing. You said, look, I actually don't mind if I die on stage. Did
I
you?
don't. I either want to die in my sleep or die on stage.
Is it true that you've told your bandmates that because you know you do have the asthma and you have, you know, a history, have you told your bandmates that if you keel over and actually die on stage, they are to continue playing?
Yeah, they're gonna play when the Saints go marching in, and then they're all gonna get up, and if it's in America, lead the audience in the song "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," which I just found out was written in 1907.
And you want this to happen even though your dead body has been carried off the stage?
Well, I want it to stay there unless it's too morbid. If it's too morbid, take it off.
That was Meat Loaf, whose death was announced this week, ending that edition of Hard Talk, which was first broadcast in 2016.